Welcome to Voices in the Wilderness, conversations about church and leader health. Thank you so much for listening. We encourage you to keep the conversation going. Voices in the Wilderness is brought to you by Preparing for Amazement Ministries, where we empower and equip churches and leaders to create lasting and transformational health. Visit amazed15.org to learn more. We also welcome any comments or suggestions. Simply email us at podcast@amazed15.org. My name is Marcus Carlson, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of me interviewing a guest and adding to the conversation, we're going to do a little bit of reversal. And so again, we have here with us Jen Benford, who is going to ask me some questions about leader health. So welcome, Jen, and thanks for kind of jumping in both ways.
Absolutely. So to start us off, Marcus, this is great.
I love it.
Why in your view is leader health so essential?
Yeah, I think going back to something that Patrick Lencioni said in his book, The Advantage, and his work influences our ministry greatly. I've done some training and certification with him and his organization. But in The Advantage, he said that organizational health trumps everything. It trumps resource, it trumps staffing, it trumps market share. And so as we began to wrestle with that, as I began to wrestle with that, what I discovered is in the faith-based world, that's true as well. I just add a corollary, outside the work of God through the gospel, health trumps everything. And while that's true for organizations, I also actually think that's true for leaders. That as a leader who follows Jesus, whether I'm leading in a church or a ministry, or I do a lot of consulting in the business world, right? If I'm leading in that world, it's all still the same. That outside of God's work in my life, my health is the most important factor in my success, in my effectiveness, in my longevity. And I think that really the health piece determines all of that more than anything else. And what's interesting is, that's hard, but you actually have more control over that, right? You don't have to have a particular natural talent or a special degree or education that anyone can do health. And I think secondly, we can't give what we don't have. And so if I'm in a place of unhealth or a place of emptiness, then that's what I'm giving people. And not just like those who I'm leading directly, but those I'm leading indirectly. And more importantly, my family, right? That there have been many times where, my unhealth, again, it doesn't just affect the people I lead or the organizations I serve. It affects me. It affects my family. And I think that when we lead, what we're doing is we are caring for, directing, supporting, pouring into people. And people, again, are God's most treasured possession. They're children of God, right? Every person is a child of God, whether they know it or embrace it or not. And so, I know I get the most worked up when somebody messes with my kids. And so, yeah, right. I mean, mama bear, papa bear, those are real things. You and I have both been there. And so, I just think about how much more exponential, even though God is gracious and forgiving, much more so than Marcus, uh, that these are God's kids that we're dealing with. And so it just feels like, the stakes are high. Not everything rises and falls on leaders, but a lot does rise and fall on leadership. And so if we're again coming from a place of toxicity or unprocessed hurt, it's a really big deal.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
It's good to
yeah,
hear more from you and just hear your heart instead of
yeah.
you doing us all the time. I've been on here multiple times, so this is great. So, Marcus, what have you learned from your own journey about leader health? You hinted a little bit about it, but tell us more.
Yeah, I would say, I don't, I kind of grew up in that. I didn't grow up in the church at all. I came to faith in high school through a parachurch ministry called Young Life Ministry. I know that you're familiar with and is near and dear to your heart as well. I tell people I met Jesus and my wife in Young Life. And so, so I came from the outside. which has had some really great advantages and some really great disadvantages, I think, along the way. But I fell into that kind of American evangelical trap. Well, there's more than one of them, but the American evangelical trap that, that we're supposed to sacrifice our health and sacrifice everything, and be as empty as possible, to really be good leaders, right? That I had a youth leader when I was a youth pastor sent me a bumper sticker picture, and this is like 25 years ago now, and it said, the bumper said, "Look busy, Jesus is coming." And I think that's kind of been the mindset of the church, right? That busyness is next to godliness, and that like
Yeah.
that we have to do more. And there's, first off, that's not accurate. Secondly, it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
third, I think what it does is it puts the emphasis on our work and not the work of God. And I think that's really, really dangerous, that we've taken the American value of being a workaholic and transposed that on the church. And we celebrate burnout. We celebrate, people who, we have pastors who stand up and say, proudly, I worked 60 hours this week. Like that's some sort of badge of honor. And I think that's a great shame. And so I fell into that trap, and I burned out multiple times. I'm a high energy person. I'm very driven. I'm an Enneagram 8, and so that like my mind does not stop with ideas, and I want to constantly fix. In fact, you talked in the last episode about having a team and having a counselor, and so I saw my counselor today, and I still do that monthly, like unless there's some major schedule issue, because the work is important, the self-care is important. And one of the things we talked about today was like, because of my personality and because of being an 8, like I'm a fixer, and learning over the years that you can't fix everything. You shouldn't fix everything. And so one of the things I'm trying to learn is being okay with not being able to fix everything in myself. And again, I got caught in that trap. That's not to say that leadership doesn't involve sacrifice. It does. Jesus is clear about this. It does not to say that leadership doesn't involve self-denial. Jesus, again, was very clear about this. Deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. I mean, that is part of the paradigm of Jesus's leadership. But it doesn't mean that we bring that to a level of unhealth, harm, and self-hatred. And I think that that's what happens, right? Burnout is super destructive to everyone involved. But even without the burnout, like even if you don't get to that point, I think sometimes leaders can, we push ourselves so hard and so far that it really, kind of borders on self-hatred. And if we think about the greatest commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I remind people all the time, there's 3 pieces there. Love God, love others, and love yourself. And I think leaders, and myself especially, I've always struggled with that self-love piece. And I think that sometimes we're so afraid to be with Jesus, we feel so inadequate or insecure that we just do for Jesus, as if Jesus needs our work. Right? As if the kingdom of God is not going to unfold if Marcus doesn't answer all those emails, or if Marcus doesn't do this or do that, or if Marcus takes a day off, the world's going to fall apart. And, it hasn't yet. The kingdom of God has not stopped due to my activity or inactivity.
Well,
And
that's the unlearning we have to do as part of the
right.
discipleship process, right? As leaders. And like
Yeah.
you were saying too, that it's not a healthy perspective to see that just doing and not self-caring. It's love God, love others as you love yourself. And you can deny self to a fault, to the point that you actually are unintentionally harming yourself and others because you're not showing up your best self
And
into spaces.
I've got lots of practice doing that. And it took me a long time to learn that. And still, like, I think, you continue to learn it. And when we talk about it, this is how we read that passage. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? Like it's kind of trails
Or don't
off.
even say it.
Yeah.
It's not even a trail. People don't say it generally.
Yeah.
It's like die to self to a fault.
Yeah. And again, I've learned if I'm not loving myself, it's actually really hard. It's harder to love other people. That when I have like experienced hatred towards others, a lot of the times it's really just a mirror to my own self-hatred. And a lot of times when I'm angry and frustrated with God, it's a mirror. It's
Mhm.
actually I'm like angry and frustrated with myself. Like even sometimes when I gotten upset with my kids, and my wife or even my kids would ask me like, "Why are you so upset by that?" I'm like, "I'm angry at myself. I didn't
Mm,
prevent that from happening. I didn't react to that the way
yeah.
I wanted to." And so I think this idea, like even I remember there used to be this acronym JOY, right? Based on this passage is Jesus first, others second, yourself last. And like while that's well intentioned, and certainly in that category we're probably last, I think the assumption is we get the leftovers, right?
Yeah,
Jesus
and
gets
you're
the
being
nice
selfish.
meal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Jesus gets the nice meal, and others get kind of the leftovers from Jesus, and like we get the stuff that you're gonna put in the trash or the compost pile. That's kind of I think the way we apply that, and I think that that's dangerous. And just recognizing moments of own unhealth in my
Yeah.
life, the impact they've had on my marriage, the impact they've had on my kids, the impact they've had on the ministries. That like I actually can't do the things I really want to do in the way I want to do them when I'm unhealthy. Like I'm not leading ministry in a way that is good, that I would look back on and go, I left a good impact. And again, certainly for my wife and my two kids, that's been huge. There's so much more, but I think that's kind of the 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 grand picture of some of the stuff I've learned about health as a leader.
You learned a few things here and there, huh?
Yeah, it's still learning, even when I don't want to, right? Sometimes
I
I'm like, Jesus, I need a
know.
day off, like time out. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, can this discipleship
Alright.
even pause?
No. So
No.
what advice would you give to the church and ministry leaders who profess to follow Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, I think to churches and organizations, take the health of your leaders really seriously. Don't make it harder. You can't do their health for them, but you can make it easier and you can make it harder. Right. So I take the Sabbath command very seriously and fairly literally. And so I Sabbath once a week as a routine and have been doing that for more than 12 years. And there have been churches or organizations I've served where they've made it harder, right? They're like, you've got to be 24/7 and, texts and calls and emails and guilting and shaming. And then there's been other organizations that have made it easier. Other churches have made it easier that said, like, wait a minute, why are you answering that on a Friday? Hey, you've been running pretty hard. Are you taking some time for your family? And so I think for ministries and organizations, again, you can't do this for your people, but you certainly can make it easier or harder. And I think the default is our culture is workaholic culture. Our culture is an unhealthy culture by default, right? My ordination background's in the Lutheran Church, and one of the key pieces of Lutheran theology is that we are simultaneously sinner and saint, right? But I know which of those two is Marcus's default, and it's not saint. And anytime I think it is, I have a family to help correct that.
Mhm.
So I think for organizations to understand that. I think for leaders, no one's going to do this for you. Yeah, maybe your wife or husband or closest friend, might encourage or smack you around a little bit, but only you can do this. And no one's going to set boundaries for you, especially in the church. I
Mhm.
find that when I set boundaries, the two groups of people that get the most upset are religious people and extended family. But
Mhm.
boundaries are a natural part of love. My wife loves me. She definitely has boundaries for me. I love my children. I definitely have boundaries for them, although now both are in college and over 18, so those boundaries are a little trickier, right? God loves us, and so God has boundaries for us. And breaking those boundaries doesn't have to change love, but it does impact our health. And I think that one of the key challenges is setting boundaries. And I would say, we're going to dive into the 7 habits. So I'll just share one other piece of advice for leaders is take Sabbath seriously. That the rhythm of rest is important. It's one every 7, not 7 days every 365. That it doesn't mean doing nothing necessarily. It can, but it definitely doesn't. It means not doing your ministry work. And so, especially with these devices that have us connected constantly, dinging everywhere, messages everywhere, how do we shut off? And really, that Sabbath is about it's about recognizing that we need to depend on God, and that the kingdom, though we get to be a part of unfolding it, it doesn't depend on us. And so, I think take Sabbath seriously. I would say those would be the 3 things for leaders, and I think churches and ministries that help them do that, the success is going to be dramatic. There are a lot of great leaders out there that just want permission to be healthy, or they don't want to have barriers to health. And so I think that's really important.
So good. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, we need to be functioning from a place of rest and health. And we can't be a life giving presence if we ourselves aren't experiencing life. And again, we're only effective or as effective as leaders and as organizations as we are healthy. So, what I heard you say is basically own your own story and intentionally lean into it to be discipled into the way of Jesus. And when he calls us to Sabbath, we Sabbath. There's a reason he invites us into rest, and you are a better person because of it. One of my good friends who I run with, when we say goodbye, she tells me, go and be your best self. And
I
so
love it.
that's what we're really being invited into when we're being called to follow Jesus. And what I hear you saying is behave in a way that that's your trajectory, that you're on the path to being your best self.
Yeah, I think we
So
posted a quote on social media a little while back. I don't know on which of the channels, but it was the best thing you can do for the world is be who Jesus made you to be.
100%.
Yeah.
And
And that's hard.
contribute in the way that he designed, you know, the church to be so that we can move together to go and invite more people in to experience life
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, and we can't be that person without being healthy. So Jen, thanks for doing this and for kind of just the different a way of doing it. This was fun, and we look forward to diving in. We'll talk a little bit in the next episode about why we talk about habits, and then we'll get diving into each of the 7 habits of healthy leaders. And so, again, we thank you so much for listening, and we encourage you to keep this conversation going. Voices in the Wilderness is brought to you by Preparing for Amazement Ministries, where we empower and equip churches and leaders to create lasting and transformational health. You can visit amazed15.org to learn more. Again, we welcome any comments or suggestions, especially in this series, as we'll use this podcast and these conversations to help shape the book, Habit of Healthy Leaders. And so simply email us at podcast@amazed15.org. Thank you so much for listening. We encourage you to keep the conversation going. Voices in the Wilderness is brought to you by Preparing for Amazement Ministries, where we empower and equip churches and leaders to create lasting and transformational health. Visit amazed15.org to learn more. We welcome any comments or suggestions. Simply email us at podcast@amazed15.org. And as we special note, as we do this series on habits of healthy leaders, we're going to simultaneously be doing some work on the book. And so as you listen to these podcasts, if you have thoughts or ideas, we especially encourage you to listen as you can help shape this content that we prepare for others.